Welcome to the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board Committee on Academic and Workforce Success. Good morning, my name is Fred Farias and I'm Chair of the Committee on Academic Workforce and Success. At this time, it is 10:27 a.m. and I would like to call the October 21st Committee meeting on Academic Workforce and Success to order. This meeting is being held via Zoom. Please be aware that although we are meeting via Zoom, this meeting is still being broadcast via the internet. Before we begin, I would like to take this opportunity to welcome those joining us via the Zoom and ask that they observe the following etiquette. 1, please state your name before you speak, as well as please mute your microphone when not speaking. And 3, keep background noise to a minimum. Members, we will begin with a roll call to ensure that we have a quorum. When I call your name, please respond to confirm that you are on the call. Mr. Cody Campbell?
I'm here.
Thank you. Ms. Emma Schwartz?
I'm here.
Mr. Sam Torn?
Here.
Ms. Donna Williams?
Here.
Mr. Welcome Wilson?
Here.
Please record in the minutes that we have a quorum. We move on to agenda item 2, and that's consideration of approval of the minutes for the July 22nd, 2020 committee meeting. Do I have a motion for approval of the July 22nd minutes of the CAWS meeting of the committee of that day? You all have it in front of you and had a chance to review them. Do I have a motion?
Emma Schwartz moves.
Okay, thank you. Motion by Ms. Schwartz. Do I have a second, please?
I'll second. Cody
Second
Campbell.
by Mr. Campbell. Thank you. Members, those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Those opposed say no.
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Any opposition? Hearing none, motion passes. We'll move on to agenda item number 3, which is consideration of approval of the consent calendar. The consent calendar includes non-controversial items that we think can be approved without comment or discussion. This allows us to save time for other items that need more of our attention. Highlighted items in gray are the consent items on the agenda. Next to the consent calendar, we're going to take up the consent calendar in 2 parts. One is the non-rule items and then the rule items. Of course, and as always, any board member can request that an agenda item can be removed from the consent calendar. That will give us an opportunity to discuss the items or items fully later in the meeting. Items listed on the non-rule consent for this meeting are agenda item 5O, which is consideration of adopting the staff recommendation to the committee relating to request for a new degree program from the University of Texas at Arlington, a Bachelor of Science in Data Science. The University of Texas at Austin, Bachelor of Science and Bachelor of Arts in Informatics. Agenda item 5P is consideration of approving the issuance of requests for applications for the Minority Health Research and Education Grant Program. I just wanted to recognize that online we may have somebody just from the University of Texas at Arlington in reference to their program, and that would be Minerva Cordero, Senior Associate Dean of Science and Professor of Mathematics, as well as Amir Farbin, who is the Interim Director of Data Science Program, Professor of Physics from the University of Texas at Arlington. So if you're online, thank you for being here. So we have item 5P is that consideration. So are there any agenda items that anyone would like to add to the non-rule consent calendar? Are there any items that anybody wants to remove from the consent calendar? Do I have a motion for approval of the consent calendar?
So moved, Sam Torn.
Okay, we have a motion for Mr. Torn. Do I have a second?
Second, Donna Williams.
Second by Ms. Williams. Thank you. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, members, when I call your name, please state whether you're voting for or against. Mr. Campbell?
For.
Ms. Schwartz?
For.
Mr. Torn?
For.
Ms. Williams?
For.
Mr. Wilson?
For.
Motion passes. Thank you. Members, the next item on the consent calendar are the rules items. These rules placed on the consent calendar are those that are either technical, conforming, or implement non-controversial policies around which there is consensus. Agenda item 5S 1 through 4 will be first to be addressed. 5S1 is a consideration of adopting a proposed amendment to Chapter 1, Subchapter T Section 1.223 of Board Rules concerning the Workforce Education Course Manual Advisory Committee. 5S2 is the consideration of adopting the proposed amendments to Chapter 4, Subchapter 5, Sections 4.314 of Board Rules concerning the approval of participation in the State Authorization Reciprocity Agreement, SARA, for public institutions of higher education. 5S3 is consideration of adopting the proposed amendment to Chapter 7, Subchapter B, Section 7.54 Board Rules concerning the approval for participation in the State Authorization Reciprocity Agreement, SARA, for private or independent institutions of higher education and private post-secondary educational institutions. And 5S4 is consideration of adopting the proposed amendments for Chapter 4, Subchapter C, Sections 4.56, 4.57, and 4.62 of Board Rules concerning Texas Success Initiative. Members, at this time, I would like to remove an agenda item. I would like to remove 5S4, the Texas Success Initiative rules, from the consent calendar as the board received a number of comments during the rulemaking process. Is there any objection to me recommending that? Hearing none, are there any other rules that anyone wants to remove from the rule consent calendar? Hearing none, do I have a motion for approval of the amended rule consent calendar?
So moved. Welcome, Wilson.
Okay, thank you. A motion by Mr. Wilson. Do I have a second?
Second by Emma Schwartz.
Thank you, Ms. Schwartz. Second by Ms. Schwartz. Members, when I call your name, please state whether you're voting for or against. Mr. Campbell.
For.
Ms. Schwartz.
For.
Mr. Torn.
4,
Ms. Williams.
4,
Mr. Wilson.
For.
Thank you. Motion passes. Members, we will now take up agenda item 5S4, consideration of adopting the proposed amendments for Chapter 4, Subchapter C, Sections 4.56, 4.57, and 4.62 of Board Rules concerning the Texas Success Initiative. Jarrell Booker, JD, Assistant Commissioner for College Readiness and Success, will present this item and be available to answer questions. Mr. Booker?
Thank you. Good morning, members. I'm Jarrell Booker, for the record, Assistant Commissioner for College Readiness and Success. I'm presenting 5S4, the adoption of rules for our Texas Success Initiative, which we call TSI. As many of you know, TSI is our state's process for determining college readiness. We are looking, well, I'll let Luz kind of discuss that, but we have an exam that we've had since 2013, and we are now updating that exam. Last year, we received approval to post an RFP to find a vendor to help design the exam. College Board won that approval, so we've been following that process from that RFP. Like I said, our first assessment for TSI, which is we call TSI-A, was in 2013. And what we have is these rules you have before you are for TSI 2.0, our newest exam, new and improved. And what we have today is Dr. Luz Bay from College Board to give you sort of background of what that process looked like, how we came up with the scores or the benchmarks for TSI. And then I will come back on and talk to you about a few other points of the rules and the comments that we received. Therefore, I'd like to turn over to Dr. Bay. Welcome, Dr. Bay. She has some slides, so I think the slides will also pop up. And you're on mute, Luz. Dr. Bay, you're still on mute.
How about now?
That's perfect.
Thank you.
And we will, and staff will get the slides ready for you.
Good morning. I'm Dr. Luz Bay. I'm a psychometrician at the College Board.
Welcome, Dr. Bay.
And I'm waiting for the slides to come on. Okay, thank you. So on July 21st and 22nd, we gathered content expert panelists for English language arts and reading and mathematics. The objective of the meeting was to implement a process to set college readiness benchmarks on the new TSIA2 assessments. Our eyes were on a procedurally valid implementation of standard setting study so that our results are reliable, realistic, and useful. The next slide, please. A 21-member panel was assembled for each of ELAR and mathematics. Many of the panelists have varied levels of experience as shown on the table with overlapping categories. Panelists were recruited to ensure that all levels of experience were represented and that the panel has a diverse statewide representation. Next slide, please. The bookmark method was selected for the implementation because not only is it deemed the most appropriate for this test, but it is also considered industry standard in educational assessment. Using this method, panelists reviewed test items that were ordered from easiest to the most difficult. A bookmark is placed immediately preceding the item that they judge to be too difficult for a test taker who the panelists considered barely college ready. Once each panelist has placed their bookmark, the median where the panelists have their bookmarks is where each panel has set their benchmark. Next slide, please. Because the standard setting was held during the pandemic, a previously planned in-person implementation was adjusted to be an online implementation. In this adjustment, we were mindful of three things that will minimize the impact of the change in mode from in-person to online. We were mindful that we were able to elicit the desired behavior of all of those involved, and that includes the panelists, the staff implementing, and the observers. And also another important aspect is that we made sure that we maintain or enhance the test security. Next slide, please. On this slide are the final recommended college readiness benchmarks. Through a mathematical modeling referred to as scaling, the benchmark scores are on the 910 to 990 score scale. The reporting score scale of 910 to 990 is an 81-point scale, which has the same gradation of the reporting scale in the TSI test, which was 310 to 390. Now, the first digits was different on purpose to avoid confusions. So the final recommended college readiness benchmarks are 945 for ELAR and 950 for mathematics. This means that for ELAR, when a test taker receives a score of 945 in multiple choice and a score of 5 on the essay part, that test taker is classified as college ready. Similarly, for math, a score of 950 will classify the test taker as college ready. Now, after a student takes the test and not considered, not deemed college ready based on this initial tests, they're routed to take the diagnostic tests. And this diagnostic test actually gives them a second chance to be classified as college ready. This was done in TSI for reading and writing, But for TSIA2, this second chance is new in mathematics. This new component is something that we will be closely monitoring to ensure that the initiative of giving a second chance in mathematics is useful and helpful to students. Now, based on simulation studies, this cut scores or college readiness classification scores will give us the expected percentage of students being classified as college ready that are in line with current student performance. And thank you for listening, and I now turn it over to Dr. Booker.
Thank you, Dr. Bay. Members, you heard Dr. Bay lay out the steps we took to create this TSI 2.0. Just simply put, statute requires the board to have an assessment instrument to implement TSI. It requires approval of an assessment instrument. The TSI 2.0 that we're discussing today is that instrument. Since the first time 7 years ago, we've learned a great deal around college readiness. We've had an opportunity to watch the success of students entering the field and get through their first level college course. This new exam represents all those things we've learned and improvements. Believe me, from the first time, the first RFA to now, this is an amazing improvement, and I think we've developed a very strong test. The test is also aligned with our new college readiness benchmark. So as those things change, the test had to change and keep up with those benchmarks. As you heard, we've met industry standards on developing these tests. For some of you, you're very familiar with the ACT and SAT. Well, the TSI, our version of college readiness, allows a lot of our students here in Texas to show college readiness and entering college. So we pulled it off, or you all pulled it off of consent, because we received comments from 4 collective groups with a variety of different comments. I'd like to at least kind of capture what those were. A group, South Texas, had an issue around timing. We would like to implement this on January 11th, 2021. They wanted to push it back a little bit for their own purposes, which we thought were reasonable. However, came up with that date based off of the timing, not only for higher ed, but also for K-12, the upcoming school year. We've also been very flexible in multiple measures for institutions to determine college readiness. So that should be able to at least cover those 2 weeks that they're trying to push it. We received a comment from Waco dealing with the but you'll see in your note, fine writing and English language arts to make the test simpler and clearer, and that's why the writing score couldn't be pulled out and why it's been changed. We received comments from Teacher Association in conjunction with South Plains dealing with the co-rec model. You may recall the state wanted us to move from 25 to 50% of certain students take a dev ed course as well as the college course at the exact same time. We felt students were sitting in developmental ed too long, and this allows them to progress with support and faster. We have seen great results from that over the last 2 or 3 years based off of that. So we're actually trying to go to 100% of these students who test very close to college ready. Why hold them back when we can actually get them through sooner and faster with support? The last is from a group, the Texas Association of Community Colleges, E3 Alliance in Austin, and the Dana Center. We've worked with these 3 for a while now. We support the work, particularly around the Dana Center, heavily, and they brought up a couple of pieces that we talked about. One, they're looking to delay the implementation to conduct more research. My understanding is they're also looking to delay because they would like to add additional benchmarks. And you will see in our response that the items that they are requesting do not require a delay of the exam. These are things we plan on doing and examining throughout this first year of implementation. We will continue to examine the benchmarks that we have set, like we've done previously. If the benchmarks are too low, we will come back to you a year from now and say, hey, we've looked at it, they were too low. If they were too high, we'll come back and adjust it if they were too high. So we will continue to study this as we move forward, as we get this right. In 2013, when we started, we did not have co-rec. But now that we have the ability to put students in a co-requisite model, now that we have the ability to use multiple measures and explaining this more to institutions, I think we can move forward with this test, and then of course still look at the benchmarks and look at the success of students in their first level course. We feel confident that we've developed, like I said, a quality exam, a national model for college readiness, and I move favorable report if possible. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Booker and Dr. Bay. Do members have any questions of our committee for either Mr. Booker or Dr. Bay, please?
Yeah, Dr. Frias. Okay, so Jarrell, so the test, is it harder than the previous test?
No, it's not. It's not harder. We've moved some things around to make it easier to understand. So the way we're teaching these courses, we're integrating. I'll give you an example. Integrating math and English language arts and writing, but the test had it split out. So now the test actually integrates them both. So it makes sense when you're doing English language arts that you're actually doing the writing. Previously in math, if you scored a certain score and you didn't pass, you were done at that point. Now we have the ability to do a diagnostic that if you show, you get another bite at the apple while you're taking the test to show that you're actually college ready. So I'm not saying it's harder, but it's definitely clearer and more thoughtful about determining who's college ready and who's not.
Well, so, okay, and you're convinced that because you've said it, I mean, that this is a good indicator of college readiness. Let me ask you a question. Does for students who take dual credit courses, my understanding is they have to take the TSI to show college readiness. Is that correct? In some places, they do take the TSI to show college readiness. Others had high school scores that allowed them, or SAT or ACT. Yes. Right. I mean, it's one of the three measures of college readiness. But to take dual credit, you have to show college readiness. So what's going on with the people that are? I don't really understand the co-requisite issue, but why would people want to delay a better test with even a second chance? It doesn't make sense to me. Well, I can only let you know, I mean, what they're saying to us, and the issue is some people feel that when you set a bar for college readiness, that a certain population is struggling to meet that bar. And it's our position that the bar is set by showing some 70% likelihood of getting an A, B, or C in your first college course. And that's from data. We're not arbitrarily making this information up. That's why Dr. Bay was here. So a lot of folks want either that score to be lower for their own particular needs, or they just feel that there's an opportunity to, what the Dana Center has said, a lot of students may not be taking a major that requires a higher level math. So why set a standard or a bar for a higher level math when you could actually set it for lower level, and then they're still college ready and can move forward? Our contention is. Yeah. So the dual credit, I kind of understand that in a way, but the dual credit study that Rand or whoever it was did, it basically showed that you're actually doing disservice to students that aren't college ready, right? To go through dual credit, they get discouraged. Anyway, I was talking to Dr. Frias about it last night, and just the relaxation of standards, so you can put more people through the pipeline. It actually, maybe it, perhaps generates revenue for the institutions, but I think it does the students a disservice, and I just can't believe that, you would look at not look at the students and kind of relax standards on college readiness. But that's just a comment. Thank you. No problem. And we will also meet with these groups immediately following to constantly explain where we are. Like I said, we've supported
what a lot of these groups have been doing in the past, and we'll continue to support their work and try to make sure this exam meets the needs of everyone.
Great. Any other questions for Mr. Booker or for Dr. Bay from the committee members or any member of the board? Okay, so members, just been informed that we just received a late request for public testimony on this item. Okay, so at this time, I would like to exercise my discretion as chair of this committee to allow Mr. Jeremy Martin from UT Austin to offer 3 minutes of testimony on this item as a limited exception to our board policies. Mr. Martin, are you on?
Yeah, I'm on the call.
Okay. Yes, sir. Please welcome, and you have 3 minutes, please.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. I really appreciate y'all responding to this late request. I had sent a message to the coordinating board earlier this week requesting a copy of the staff responses to the public comments that we submitted through our consensus statement with the Texas Association of Community Colleges, as well as the E3 Alliance and the Charles A. Dana Center at the University of Texas at Austin. We did not receive staff responses until last night, which is why I put in a late request for public testimony. And Mr. Stedman, just to address your question about why we think it's appropriate to delay the adoption of these rules is threefold. The first is that this is not about lowering standards. It's about using measures that accurately and reliably predict whether or not students are in fact college ready. Evidence that's been provided by the coordinating board in webinars, as well as rigorous studies and context across the nation, have shown that the emergency rules that the coordinating board has put in place to allow institutions to use measures like high school grade point average to determine college readiness are actually more accurate and predictable indicators of college readiness than standardized test scores. And this relates to the co-requisite mandate question, because the issue of whether or not students get co-requisite supports should be determined by whether or not they actually need those supports. And what evidence suggests is that relying on a standardized test score alone and strict cut scores tends to underestimate students' potential to be successful in college. All of that is to say that the goals of the House Bill 2223 co-rec mandate are actually at odds with a placement policy that relies solely on a single test score and a cut score to determine readiness, that those two policy goals are actually at odds with one another. And then the last comment that I would like to make is that we submitted a really thoughtful, I think, consensus statement from, like I mentioned, the Texas Association of Community Colleges, as well as the E3 Alliance, that laid out 6 arguments for why we believe that the emergency placement measures that institutions are currently operating under are a better option than the TSIA-2. We didn't receive any responses to those until last night. And we really think that the committee ought to take some time to consider those comments in light of the equity implications in over-reliance on placement tests, which have historically been used to keep Black students, Hispanic students, and students from low-income communities from being able to access college-level courses. And frankly, we think that these rules represent a step backwards from the progress that's being made in changing some of our approaches to placement in light of the COVID-19 pandemic. So again, thank you for letting me comment here at the last minute, and I'd be happy to answer any questions about any of those and continue this conversation. I do want to emphasize I appreciate the relationship that we have with the coordinating board and really look forward to continuing to work with y'all on this.
Let me ask a question. The co-requisite model, that's only when, a student goes to, say, a 2-year college or even a 4-year college. Is that right? In other words, it doesn't apply to dual credit. So that basically if you need, developmental education, remediation, which is a great thing. I mean, if you need it, let's give it to them. The idea of co-requisite is you take both developmental and a regular course at the same time, so you're kind of in the mainstream. I understand that, but that doesn't apply to dual credit, does it?
That's correct. It does not apply to dual credit.
Well, but if you go to a community college and you apply, do you have to have a minimum score on the TSI, or I mean, I think they'll just admit you and then put you in a co-requisite program. Is that right? If you're not qualified.
So it depends on the TSI score. And if you are a non-high school student, so if you are entering a post-secondary program that requires any type of entry-level mathematics or English course to complete that program, the current placement policy is that you have to meet a cut score in order to be ineligible for the co-requisite support. I think the argument that we're making is that cut score is just kind of messy in terms of determining which students do or do not need additional co-requisite support. For example, saying that a student that's at a math score of 351 is so demonstrably different from a student has a math score of 349 that they would require additional levels of remediation just doesn't make a lot of policy sense. Many students do need support. I do think that the co-requisite bill is correct, that delivering that support while allowing students to directly enter into an entry-level course is, based on what we've seen in all of the other states that have done this, the appropriate way to go. The thing that we're concerned about is twofold. One is that the proposed rules increase that mandate to 100% of underprepared students, which numerous colleges from around the state have already submitted comments saying that they do not have the capacity to do right now. We also think that it exceeds the legislative intent of House Bill 2223 that made an exception for only allowing 75% of underprepared students to be placed into co-recs, simply because we don't know what types of supports those other 25% of students may or may not need. And we want to allow colleges the flexibility of being able to provide those in novel and unique ways. And then the final point is that the placement test alone cannot determine whether or not a student needs co-requisite support or what types of co-requisite supports that they do need. Instead, there are multiple measures that are being permitted to be used now, such as high school GPA, high school coursework, that determine that. And the evidence that we reference in our public comment shows that relying on test scores alone is actually a really inaccurate way of determining whether or not students need support, and it doesn't tell you what types of supports they need to be successful. It just pumps out a number.
Right, and so I mean, just listening, which I don't understand all those details, but it seems like your major criticism is test scores don't tell the whole story. But look, it's a pretty good measure. I just want to make sure we're not relaxing test scores, and you guys can deal with what other metrics show college readiness. But anyway, I appreciate your testimony. It's a very important issue.
Thank you.
Yes. Any other questions from the board or the committee members for Mr. Martin, his testimony? Mr. Booker, would you like to add to the discussion?
Absolutely, and welcome, Jeremy. We worked with Jeremy for a long time on this issue, and some of these aren't new points that we've heard. Let me say a couple things. One, their comments were submitted, but did not come through the normal rules process email portal that we required in the request for rule comment. So we did not see that in time and worked diligently to get a response to them and get it posted as soon as possible. So I'm glad Jeremy had an opportunity to speak today. A couple points I want to deal with. One is the 100% from the co-rec. The 100% of students who test really close to that number. That's why we did it. Just like Jeremy's saying, we don't think the test score is end all be all, but we even require or asking institutions to have multiple measures. The test score is an additional measure to help them in the local schools make these sort of decisions. Everything Jeremy is saying, we agree in part, but it's separate from just having a score. You will still have the SAT, but still want to look at people's GPA. You will still want to look at people's rank. You will look at the courses they took. All those things come into context, and those are things that we support in addition to this exam. So that's where we stand with giving that sort of flexibility. But let me address one more point. We talked about adversely affecting certain students. What happens when the scores are lower is you are lowering expectations for Black or brown students. And in my opinion, I think we figure out what the likelihood of 70% likelihood of A, B, or C, and that is for everyone. And then we work in K to 12, we work in higher ed, we work with our co-rec and dev ed, we work with our advising to make sure it's being tracked into sometimes lower levels of math. Sometimes if you decide to change your major, you're not ready for it because you went a different route. Those are the reasons we set the score to be whether you go to a 2-year college or a 4-year college. And because of that, we will continue to work with Jeremy's group. We only received, like I said, clustered 4 comments or 4 different groups. And only 2 of them came from institutions that directly. We held 51 sessions on discussing this. We had, I don't know, 30 different colleges on our review process, our beta testing. And so we have some who are saying they can, many say that it's an adjustment on how they do business. And we're excited that we've shown growth in students who are taking co-rec. Once again, if we did not have co-rec, this is a completely different story. But we are no longer keeping people who test right there at that marker in dev ed and then they can't get out of 2-year colleges. And like I said, I think this is a strong exam. But I also think things that Jeremy's saying, we will continue to push for multiple measures. Our commissioner showed a lot of flexibility during COVID to allow multiple measures that are continuing through this upcoming summer. Maybe we'll revisit that, but at the same time, we continue to support the flexibility of colleges and institutions to determine college readiness, but we do need a measure that we are showing some uniformity and it's not just arbitrary.
Thank you so much. Any other comments or questions from the committee?
Commissioner, do you have a thought on this?
If I could weigh in, just underline a couple of the points that Jarrell just made. So I think there's 2 sets of policy questions that it's important not to conflate. So there's a set of policy questions about how we determine who's college ready and who should get intervention. And then there's a set of policy questions about the kind of intervention we provide. So as Jarrell mentioned, like one of the things that we've done this year is we've provided additional flexibility to the institutions and partnered with them to try to accelerate the adoption of co-requisite remediation and encourage the use of multiple measures as they think about the kind of interventions they're going to provide students. So co-requisite remediation is very different from traditional remediation. So traditionally, a student wasn't college ready. They might get put in a remedial course, a full-blown course that they're paying tuition for that they're earning 0 college credit for. In co-requisite remediation, the student's actually placed into the college course, but with support around the particular issues. So that could be, you need support around a couple of topic areas. Work through these modules while you're in the college credit bearing course, and that'll help you be successful. The student doesn't have to get a particular grade on the co-requisite remediation. They just have to, they're being provided that additional support that's going to help them get through a college course and be able to earn the credit. The colleges have reported very encouraging success with their co-requisite models, and we're working with colleges to encourage them to adopt non-course-based models where it's more like those targeted, personalized kind of interventions. Then there's that changes the policy conversation about who gets intervention or not, because let's just stipulate that nobody believes that we should use a single test score, a single cut score to determine whether students get access to a college course. But that's not the issue on the table. The issue on the table in the context of co-requisites is who's going to get intervention at all. So I was talking with one of our college presidents about this the other day from one of the large colleges. And he was telling me about the success that they'd had with students who were in their co-requisite remediation. So he had some folks making the case that we should have more exemptions, essentially that we should either suspend or bring in some other measures. One of the things he said to me that stuck with me is he said, I I don't think we ought to not pay attention to who needs remediation. So it's a question about who's going to get assigned to co-requisite remediation in the first place. So any moves that we make in this context, I think, to saying we're going to have either we're not going to have a test or we're going to lower the cut score. Really, what we're doing is we're exempting more students from being able to get that targeted support in areas that they might need to navigate the college course. I don't see any reason to do that.
Yeah, which is critical for their long-term success.
Right.
I mean, anyway, I think, Mr. Booker made an excellent case, for the new plan. I don't really understand why it needs to be delayed, because you can look at other measures.
And so we are, let me just emphasize, as Jarrell had mentioned, we are actively working with multiple organizations and with the institutions, and look forward to working closely with them over this next year and beyond, not only around implementation of the tests on who gets intervention, but also making sure that there's high-quality interventions that are available that are going to help students navigate those courses.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Mr. Booker, Dr. Bay, and Mr. Martin. At this time, do I have a motion for approval of rules 4.56, 4.57, and 4.62?
So moved, Sam Torn.
Okay, I have a motion on the floor by Mr. Torn. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Williams. Thank you. Is there any discussion on the item? Hearing no discussion from the committee. Members, when I call your name, please state whether you're voting for or against. Mr. Campbell.
For.
Ms. Schwartz.
For.
Mr. Torn.
For.
Ms. Williams.
For.
Mr. Wilson.
For.
Okay, thank you all. Motion passes.
Dr. Frias, Sam Torn.
Yes, sir. You're.
I'm gonna have to leave the meeting for a while. I'll rejoin by telephone as I am able.
Okay, I appreciate you letting us know. That should not be an issue with our quorum, but I appreciate you letting us know. Thank you. Thank you, sir. Okay, we are moving on to item agenda 4, which is public testimony on the other agenda items relating to the Committee on Academic and Workforce Success. We do not have anyone registered to testify, so we'll go on to the next item, which is agenda item 5A, is a report on activities of the Certification Advisory Council. No action is required, members, but we'll hear from Dr. Jacob Tingle, who is the chair of the Certification Advisory Council. He'll provide a brief update on activities and will be available to answer questions. Dr. Tingle.
Good morning. Am I unmuted?
You are unmuted. You're fine.
Great. I appreciate the time this morning. I am Jacob Tingle from Trinity University, and at Trinity I serve in the capacity as the director of our Office of Experiential Learning and have a faculty appointment in our School of Business. As you indicated, I am also the chair of the Certification Advisory Council, which is a statutory authorized advisory committee providing advice and recommendations on the regulation of private post-secondary educational institutions, which is a regulation found in the Texas Education Code, Chapter 61, Subchapter G. The statute requires a committee composed of 6 members with experience in higher education. 3 of the members must be drawn from private or independent institutions of higher education, such as my institution, Trinity University. The other 3 members are drawn from public institutions. The current committee members' institutional duties range from academic to administrative to financial, which provides a wealth of experience and a range of experience to be able to provide good background advice to the coordinating board staff. Current members of the council are Dr. Hua Lee from A&M Kingsville, Dr. Cheryl Sneed Green from Prairie View A&M University, Dr. Gina Anderson from Texas Women's University, Dr. Lynette Gillis from Concordia University, Texas, Dr. Dorothy Langley from Jarvis Christian College, and myself. The most common activity of the CAC involves a review of site visit reports and applicant responses in connection with certificates of authority. These certificates are issued to degree granting institutions that are at the time unaccredited but working toward board recognized accreditation. The CAC can also be asked to review an application by an accrediting agency for recognition by the board. The advisory committee is scheduled to meet on a quarterly basis. However, if no applications are pending, the quarterly meeting is canceled. As you can see from the submitted report, the CAC met once during the 2019-20 academic year and considered an application to renew the Certificate of Authority for the Southwest School of Art in San Antonio. The CAC recommended the renewal of this Certificate of Authority. The written report to the board includes a summary of the CAC's activity during the past academic year and notes from the October 30th, 2019 meeting. Do note that those notes are pending approval in the next CAC meeting, which is scheduled for January 21. You also have in the report a roster of all of the CAC members, including our titles and credentials. Coordinating board staff have communicated with us that another reapplication for a Certificate of Authority is pending a site visit. So we anticipate meeting at and discussing that site visit and their responses during the January 2021 CAC meeting. At this point, I thank you for your time, and I appreciate the opportunity to represent the CAC and my colleagues in this capacity. And I can answer some questions potentially about the October 30th meeting if you'd like, or have any other questions.
Thank you, Dr. Tingle, for your report. Does the committee have any questions or comments for Dr. Tingle? Hearing none, thank you for being here. We appreciate your time and your work on this committee.
Thank you all very much for your work.
Thank you. Agenda item 5B is next, and that's the report on activities related for Graduate Education Advisory Committee. No action is required. We have Dr. Karen Butler Purry, fiscal year 2020 chair for the Graduate Education Advisory Committee. She will provide a brief update of activities and be available to answer questions. Dr. Butler Purry, welcome. Dr. Purry here.
Good morning.
Oh, there you are. Welcome. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for this opportunity. So the Graduate Education Advisory Committee purview includes a regular review of current issues relating to graduate education. The GEAC makes policy recommendations to staff and the board. GEAC is composed of faculty and administrators from public, graduate degree granting institutions of all sizes, regions, and missions. The majority of the members are from public and health-related institutions. There is at least one representative from a private research institution and one graduate student member. For the 2019-20 academic year, I served as chair and I am Associate Provost for Graduate and Professional Studies at Texas A&M University. Our vice chair was Dr. Andrea Galato, who is Dean of the Graduate College at Texas State University. The committee met one time last year in November 2019, and the summary notes have not yet been approved. So some of the highlights from that meeting include discussion of actions to address the findings from the 2018 National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine Sexual Harassment of Women report, discussion of policies and best practices related to online graduate programs, discussions with the coordinating board staff on the program inventory and on the graduate program review process. In particular, on that topic, we discussed data from the first review cycle, which was concluded in fall 2019, and the new cycle that would be expanded to a 10-year cycle to align with the minimum prescribed by the Texas Education Code 61.0512. So next I'll elaborate on a few of our discussions. So on the topic related to the 2018 National Academies report, the GEAC members shared measures, efforts, and initiatives from their institutions that address the concerns raised in the report in relation to climate, culture, and consequences of sexual harassment. Members talked about initiatives such as women in STEM programs, campus workshops and trainings for faculty and staff, Title IX training, and campus climate surveys. Also, graduate student associations initiating surveys and raising awareness on the topic on their campuses, and institutions using internally developed and external instruments and validated surveys to assess for climate issues. The National Academies report also included discussions about issues related to when a student's advisor is also their funding source, and discussed some of the recommendations in relation to addressing that power dynamic. Additional discussion was held on sexual misconduct, including how other students are impacted during and after an investigation, and some of the questions that institutions might consider as they sort of study that impact. And then lastly, the coordinating board staff shared some information on two bills that passed the 86th legislature regarding sexual misconduct, Senate Bill 212 and House Bill 1735. Two additional topics of discussion focused on online programs. One related to policies for international students enrolling in online programs, and the other was related to institutional best practices. In relation to international students enrolled on campus in online programs, the GIAC institutions just talked about the challenges related to the maximum number of credit hours that could be taken fully online as a Department of Homeland Security restriction. In terms of institutional best practices, we discussed how institutions estimate the cost of starting online programs and when a return on investment can be realized, the tuition and fee models for online programs and online courses, and also training and professional development for faculty teaching online courses. The GIAC concluded the meeting by developing a long list of future agenda items. So the members look forward to reconvening in 2021 and continuing its efforts to provide input to the coordinating board staff and the board on topics impacting the changing landscape of graduate education in the state and the nation. Thank you.
Dr. Butler-Purry, that was a great report, and thank you for serving on that committee and chairing it. I'll make two comments. I was recently on a webinar with you mentioned the National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine, and it was very fascinating. We have a Texas person on that, a doctor who she does a wonderful job, and she's at one of our institutions there in the state. It was very fascinating. It's related to COVID-19 and very, very important, not only to Texas, but our whole country and our whole world. So that was very fascinating. So we have a Texan on that, which is great. It's a very prestigious organization and group. You also mentioned, I think, important right now for Texas, and we hear about the international students and the graduate programs and challenges. What is the committee doing? And I mean, you mentioned a little bit that you addressed that issue, but has that become a big issue in the institutions here in Texas?
So yes, and we had our meeting in November 2019. Of course, that predated COVID, and we were really sort of just talking about the challenges in enrolling international students who were currently in the U.S. in online programs. But of course, since COVID, there are a multitude of challenges that we are experiencing. In particular, the challenges in actually enrolling students from outside of the U.S. into our programs. So this year, most campuses throughout the country had significantly lower numbers of new graduate students. We were able to enroll some of those remotely, but we were not able to have large numbers to come into the U.S. I think we are also dealing with just the uncertainty of when that's going to change, as we then think about our programs. International students represent large numbers of students in research programs, and then also even in our master's programs. And so, yes, I think it's been quite challenging trying to deal with that changing landscape. We haven't convened this year, but we do have a state organization of graduate deans. And so we sort of facilitate conversation through that group.
Great. Well, thank you, like I said, for your work. Any comments or questions from the committee for Dr. Butler-Puri? If not, thank you for being here. We appreciate the update.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Yes, ma'am. We now move on to agenda item 5C, which is a report on activities of Applied Texas Advisory Committee. Members, there's no action required. Dr. Rebecca Lothringer is Associate Vice President of Enrollment at the University of Texas at Arlington, and Dr. Mordasi Brownlee, Vice President for Student Success at St. Phillips College, will provide a brief summary of the committee's activities and be available to answer questions. Welcome.
Thank you so much, and thank you so much, Chair. We appreciate you all. Thank you to the board. It's Mordecai Brownlee. Just wanted the record to reflect, but it's an honor to be with you all on this morning. To the Committee of the Academic Workforce Success, to the members of the board, certainly Commissioner, Assistant Commissioner Booker, Commissioner Keller. It's an honor to be with you all on today. I have with me Rebecca Lothringer, again, who was serving as co-chair of this committee. And we're here to share all of the good work that we've done over the past cycle. The purpose of this Applied Texas Advisory Committee is to discuss and vote on changes that may be needed to the applications for the upcoming application cycle. The committee also addresses additional initiatives to strengthen student participation and access to higher education. We had a very successful cycle on last year. We met 3 times on September 30th of 2019, February 24th of 2020, December 16th of 2019. And then, of course, as you heard with the February 24th date, COVID-19 then prohibited any future meetings at this particular time. The committee did an outstanding job. I had the pleasure of being nominated and selected to serve in the 2-year capacity as co-chair. Rebecca Lothringer has served as the 4-year co-chair. In terms of the work that we've been able to accomplish, certainly due to the pandemic, our ATAC annual sponsored TAC Speedy Committee session was a workshop. Our Applied Texas workshop was canceled. However, in the midst of that, we were able to host a virtual workshop for the upcoming AWS Go Live of our platform, moving for the Applied Texas to the AWS system. That's slated to take place in fall, our upcoming fall of 2021. So we're looking forward to that. And in regards to additional successes that occurred, we did a lot of work to ensure the accuracy and flow of data from the applications desired by the institutions and all of our partners. In regards to those who served on this committee, that's been included in the notes as well as our meeting notes, as noted at the end of this report. Additional daily application deliveries were also part of what we were able to accomplish for the colleges and universities. And in response to Senate Bill 25, we were able to make the adjustments towards the proper opt-in of the applications of the applicants. And I also want to give an opportunity for Rebecca Lothringer to share any words at this time.
Thank you, Mordecai. I would just like to thank the board for your continued support. The advisory committee walks a very fine line between improvements to the application that will assist both the universities, but mostly in colleges, but mostly that will assist the students. We look for ways to improve the student experience and the efficiencies for students as they complete the application. I also would like to thank the Texas Association for Collegiate Registrars and Admissions Officers for their help in taking the workshop virtual for us this year. We had 900 logins to that workshop this summer, and TACRO was a big reason why we were able to pull that off.
Great.
Thank you
so much. Before y'all leave, thank you, number one. But number two is, when I was preparing for this a week ago with the staff, by the way, we have a great staff at the coordinating board that helps all our board members, but specifically on this, I ran across, Chairman Stedman and I always enjoy, and the rest of the board members, when we have a lot of time, we like to highlight colleges and universities and great things that people are doing. We can't do it now a lot because of the pandemic and all that's going on. But one of the things that came to mind is, of course, I'm very familiar with UT Arlington, being involved with the UT system. But I asked the staff about St. Phillips College, And so I was wondering, Dr. Brownlee, if you can just like in 3 seconds, give us a little recap of St. Phillips, because not a lot of people know about it. And I know there's great work being done there.
So we greatly appreciate that opportunity, and I'll extend just a little bit beyond 3 seconds. So we're celebrating 122 years here in San Antonio, Texas. For those that are unaware, we were founded by the Episcopal Church as a school for emancipated female slaves to teach them a trade, how to cook and how to sew. And we have now grown to a community college. We have 2 locations: our Martin Luther King campus, Southwest campus, which is a former Air Force base. We also serve at all 3 Joint Base San Antonio locations, over 13,500 students, and we're all a part of the Alamo College community system. So thank you for that opportunity, sir.
Yes, thank you. I thought, when I looked at that, I was familiar with you, but I didn't know all the details. And then when I found out more about last week, and we're not able to highlight a lot of things we normally do, but I just definitely wanted to not only give you a shout out, but continue the great work that y'all are doing there as well as UT Arlington, of course.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you for being here. We move on to agenda item 5D, members, and that is a report on the activities of the Advisory Council on Post-Secondary Education for Persons with Intellectual and Developmental Disabilities. Dr. Deanna Lechenberger, hopefully I got that right, Director
Good job.
for Academic Success and Employment, which is for CASE, it's called. She's from Texas Tech University, another great institution in our state. Well, she'll provide a brief summary of council activities and be available to answer questions. Thank you, Doctor, for being here.
Thank you. And I'm going to butcher your name as well. Thank you, Dr. Frias. Is that how you say your last name?
Farias, that's close. That's good.
Farias. Okay, Farias. Okay, that looks better then. Okay, members of the board and the Committee on Academic Workforce and Success, thank you for this opportunity to share the work of the Advisory Council on Post-Secondary Education for individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities. I am the chair for this council, and I'm pleased to be presenting this today. One of the strengths I want to point out of this advisory council is that his representatives from state agencies and organizations, self-advocates, family members of individuals with disabilities, and university personnel who run post-secondary programs at their respective universities for this population. The Advisory Council has met quarterly this year and has had multiple subcommittees researching and meeting weekly over the summer to collect the information we provided in our report. We also had wonderful support, as Dr. Fierras mentioned, from the coordinating board staff. I mean, we couldn't have done this work without them working on the technology and everything. So just a shout out to the staff. The Advisory Council has completed our report for this year and have set up some considerations for work over the next year. With time allotted for this quick presentation, I'd like to draw your attention to 3 of our recommendations. There were about 15, but I'm going to hit on the top 3 really. The council requested to replace the term IDD with neurodevelopmental disorders to clarify the target population. Data needed to be collected and focused on the 4 main neurodevelopmental disorders according to the Diagnostic Manual of Mental Disorders, DSM-5. And that would include autism spectrum disorder, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, intellectual disabilities, as well as specific learning disorders. So that was our first recommendation. We felt like that in collecting data and doing research, different organizations, different state agencies define IDD differently. So we wanted to go with a singular definition. So this is what we're recommending. The next one was to leverage partnerships to provide grants to allow institutes of higher education to develop post-secondary programs on their college campuses or training schools that develop supports and services for students with neurodevelopmental disorders, especially in rural areas. And thirdly, have the Higher Ed Coordinating Board sponsor or co-sponsor with other entities a state conference that focuses on best practice models for post-secondary education models for these students, and to highlight all the stuff that's going on currently in the state, as well as encourage people to come that want to learn how to start a program to support this population. This concludes my report. I'm trying to be concise. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Dr. Lechenberger. Any questions from the committee? Okay, thank you.
Again.
Do I have a motion for approval of the report?
So moved.
A move by Mr. Campbell, correct? Thank you, Mr. Campbell. Do I have a second?
Emma Schwartz will second.
Second by Ms. Schwartz. Any discussion? Members, all in favor, say aye, and pose nay. Let's see, let's go ahead and we'll go down the list here. Discussion. I believe we can just vote aye or nay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No. Hearing none, the motion passes. Thank you all. Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you.
Okay, we move on to agenda item 5E, and that's consideration of adopting the report on access to higher education for persons with intellectual and developmental disabilities, Texas Education Code Section 61.06641. Gerald Booker, JD, Assistant Commissioner for College Readiness and Success, will present this item and be available to answer questions. Mr. Booker.
Members, first want to thank Dr. Lechenberger for her leadership, and Waylon McGuire and my division for staffing this committee. I'll be brief since she just gave you a report of the activities. You all just approved the report of the activities of the council. They actually completed a 25-page report, which now I'm going to get approval for. I'm not going to revisit everything she shared, but you will see on the screen there 3 of the 15 recommendations that they had. I only highlighted these 3 because I think the committee spent a considerable amount of time discussing these, and I felt that from the few times I sat on the meetings, that these were 3 that they thought was critically important. I mean, they're all important, but these are 3 I thought the board would be specifically interested in. Dr. Lechenberger already talked about the first one, dealing with the name change and sort of a concerted focus on what we'll be working with. 2, one is leveraging partnerships to provide grants, which I think be very important for post-secondary and even our K-12 to make that sort of transition smoother. And the last, I think, is something that she just mentioned, but I do know that our division has found great success when you do a state conference that puts a spotlight on not only these students, but the work that institutions can do to actually better serve these students, to help improve their transition and better attainment. So I won't spend much time, but there was a 17-member group. Like I said, 15 recommendations. I only highlighted 3. The recommendations they spoke about covered overall accessibility, college readiness, funding, workforce employment, and outreach and educational materials. That said, I move for a favorable approval of the report that Dr. Lechenberger's committee put together.
Thank you, Mr. Booker. Any questions for Mr. Booker? Do I have a motion?
Emma Schwartz moves.
Thank you. Motion by Ms. Schwartz. Do I have a second?
Second, welcome.
Second.
Wilson.
Second by Mr. Wilson. Thank you. Any discussion? Hearing none. Members, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposition? Nay. Hearing none, no nays. Motion passes. Thank you all. Thank you very much. Agenda item 5F is consideration of adopting the report on the recruitment of persons with intellectual and developmental disabilities at institutions of higher education, Texas Education Code Section 61.0664. Jarrell Booker, JD, Assistant Commissioner for College Readiness and Success, will present this item and be available to answer questions. Mr. Booker.
Yes, thank you again, Chairman Frias. Agenda item 5F is dealing with a separate survey dealing with the recruitment of persons with IDD. So this survey has been around for at least 3 years, and I think it was kind of instrumental in moving towards having a full advisory committee that Dr. Lechenberger was the chair of. In this instance, you will see on your screen, what we've been doing over 3 years is running a survey on how institutions are recruiting students or persons with IDD. And I'm only capturing in a nutshell what we have seen time and time again. And I think it's time with these 2 reports to go back to the legislature and say, this is what we found. Let's combine them and see what we can actually do to implement some of these recommendations. And what you'll see is having insufficient time to address their needs, the one that I've seen, and we spoke about it 2 years ago, is the unavailability of transportation for these students. And then what I think you will see is the recommendations from these surveys, which I do think is important. But participating in college fairs or transition fairs will be critical for these students. And I think that more institutions and K-12 partnerships will help bring that to fruition. I will say that over the last 3 years, we've grown in a number of institutions that have participated in this survey. And I think that's a testament to the efforts of people like Dr. Leichenberger and Texas Tech and other institutions that have supported this work. And I hope to see that hopefully we can get some good outcomes long-term from these reports. I move favorable approval.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Booker?
Ask for favorable approval. I'm sorry for moving things for the board.
That's good. Do I have a motion from the board committee? Motion for approval from the committee?
I'll move again, Emma Schwartz.
Thank you, Ms. Schwartz. Do I have a second?
Second, Donna Williams.
Second by Ms. Williams. Any discussion, first of all? Hearing none, members, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposition? Hearing none, motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for the presentation. And I think that completes Dr. Leichenberger's portion. Is that correct? So thank you for being here, Doctor. Agenda item 5G is consideration of adopting the report on the effectiveness of the Advised Texas Program, General Appropriations Act, House Bill 1, Article 3, Section 5186, Texas Legislature. Jarrell Booker, JD, Assistant Commissioner of College Readiness and Success, will present this item and be available to answer questions. Mr. Booker.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to point out that we have had this Advised Texas program for many years. Many of you are very familiar with it. And what we have seen is a constant growth of what you do when you create a college-going culture. As a reminder, Advised Texas is our near-peer advisement program where we put advisors in high-need schools with low college-going rates, and they are providing assistance and guidance around attending college, financial aid, trying to identify a best fit for these students. And it's really been an amazing program through the years. And what you will see here is how we have a professor out of Stanford, Dr. Bettinger, who conducts the national survey for Advised Texas, but then he's able to zero in on Advised Texas numbers. And what we have found is we had modest growth before, but we're now starting to see the impressive numbers and success of what Advised Texas can actually do when it's sustained over a course of a few years. Our advisors met with over 50,000 high school seniors, and what you see there is an increase from the previous year for college applications and FAFSA submissions. So despite it being here, it's still increasing as the numbers grow. They're doing better. The second bullet you'll see around college enrollment rates. Previously, it was just an advising program, but once it received state funds, we're really looking at how those students do once they leave and attend college. And you'll see that the 2018 graduating class improved by 0.6 percentage points for low-income population, that being the most difficult population for us to serve traditionally. We're seeing an improvement over schools that do not have Advised Texas advisors at their high schools. And then the last is something we talked about earlier as far as post-secondary success, but we figured we need to start at the high school level and looking at how African-American students, Hispanic students do. And you will see there's an even greater percentage, a 1.9 percentage point increase for four-year college students for African-American students, and a 1.1 percentage point increase in two-year college attendance for Hispanic students. So we're seeing that growth that we expected. Advised Texas has grown, and you will see a future agenda item when we talk about our virtual advisor, but we're proud of what this program is doing, and we appreciate the board support and legislative support as we go into the next session. So I did want to show the success, but it's been modest, but now we're starting to see real results, and we're really excited about it. So I ask for a favorable approval on this agenda item.
Yeah, Mr. Booker, it's a great program. I agree. You mentioned Mr. Bettinger, I believe, or Dr. Bettinger. What is his role, his or her role in this?
He's an independent evaluator. He's an associate professor for their evaluation and assessment solutions there at Stanford. So he's an independent evaluator who looks at this program across the United States and specifically in Texas.
Okay, great. Any questions for Mr. Booker? If not, do I have a motion to accept the report?
So move, welcome Wilson.
Thank you. A motion by Mr. Wilson. Do I have a second, please?
Second, Donna Williams.
Thank you. Second by Ms. Williams. Any discussion? Hearing none. Members, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposition? Hearing none, the motion passes. Thank you. We move on to agenda item 5H, which is consideration of adopting the Graduate Medical Education Report, an assessment of opportunities for graduates of Texas medical schools to enter residency programs in Texas. This is in reference to Texas Education Code, section 61.0661B. Dr. Stacy Silverman, Assistant Commissioner for Academic Quality and Workforce, will present this item and be available to answer questions. Dr. Silverman.
Thank you, Chairman Frias, and good morning, members of the board. Each even-numbered year, the coordinating board is required to conduct an assessment of the adequacy of opportunities for Texas medical school graduates to enter graduate medical education or residency training in the state. The results of the assessment are due to the Texas Legislature by December 1st, and this is the 5th such report. The report presents the required data and analysis, including a comparison of the number of first-year graduate medical education positions available to the number of Texas medical school graduates, a statistical analysis of recent trends and projections of the numbers of medical school graduates and first-year graduate medical education positions, methods and strategies for achieving a ratio for the number of first-year graduate medical education positions to the number of medical school graduates in the state of at least 1.1 to 1, an evaluation of the current and projected physician workforce needs of the state for the development of additional first-year graduate medical education positions, and an examination of whether the state should ensure that a first-year graduate medical education position is created for each new medical student position established by a medical or dental unit. Since 2014, when the Texas Legislature began its graduate medical education expansion efforts, more than 400 new first-year residency positions have been created and 19 new medical residency programs have been established. As the GME expansion enters its 7th year, the efforts to increase the number of first-year residency positions have provided Texas medical school graduates with greater opportunity to remain in the state for their residency training. However, with the establishment of 6 new medical schools, maintaining the state's success in having 10% more first-year residency positions than medical school graduates will quickly erode. Unless the state provides additional funding to support the GME expansion efforts, the goal of 1.1 to 1 ratio cannot be maintained. Based on the progress made in previous years and to achieve and maintain the 1.1 to 1 goal, the report includes the following recommendations. First, continue funding and support of the GME expansion efforts to maintain the 1.1 to 1 ratio of first-year residency positions to medical school graduates. This would maintain support for currently funded positions and provide funding for the additional new residency positions to accommodate the increase in the number of medical school graduates resulting from the opening of new medical schools. Second, maintain funding and support for the Family Practice Residency Program. The program was started in the late 1970s to help address physician distribution. Family physicians can more easily practice in communities and rural areas, and their geographic distribution is similar to the general population, unlike other medical specialties. Third, maintain funding and support for the Coordinating Board's statewide preceptorship program established to encourage Texas medical students to consider selecting a primary care residency career. The recommendation is for approval.
Thank you, Dr. Silverman. Any questions for Dr. Silverman from the committee or the board? If not, do I have a motion for approval of the report? Motion?
Emma Schwartz.
A motion by Ms. Schwartz. Thank you. Do I have a second, please?
Second, Donna Williams.
Second by Ms. Williams. Any discussion? Hearing none, members, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Okay.
Aye.
Any nays? Hearing none, motion passes. Thank you. We move on to agenda item 5I, which is consideration of adopting the Aerospace and Aviation Report, which is the Texas Government Code Section 481.0066D-2. Dr. Stacy Silverman, Assistant Commissioner for Academic Quality and Workforce, will provide this item and be available to answer questions. Dr. Silverman.
Thank you, Dr. Frias. The coordinating board is required to complete a report that summarizes the aerospace technology research conducted by Texas General academic institutions in even numbered years and submit the report to the legislature by December 1. The information in the report is also shared with the Aerospace and Aviation Office, part of the Texas Economic Development and Tourism Office in the Office of the Governor. The report provides an overview of the research expenditures and research awards related to aerospace technology. 11 institutions reported research expenditures in fiscal year 2019, totaling just over $40 million. The institutions also reported having more than 400 awards, totaling just under $178 million. The report also lists the funding, award amount, and title information for all active aerospace technology awards. The recommendation is for approval.
Very good. Any questions for Dr. Silverman? Do I have a motion for this adoption for approval?
So moved. Donna Williams.
Thank you, Ms. Williams. So, we have a motion by Ms. Williams. Do I have a second?
Second, welcome, Wilson.
Thank you. Second by Mr. Wilson. Any discussion? Hearing none, members, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposition? Hearing none, the motion passes. Thank you. We'll move on to agenda item 5J, which is consideration of adopting the study and report on core curriculum, Senate Bill 2586, Texas Legislature, regular session, Texas Education Code Section 61.8221. Dr. Stacy Silverman, Assistant Commissioner for Academic Quality and Workforce, will present this item and be available to answer questions. Dr. Silverman.
Thank you, Dr. Frias. Senate Bill 25, passed by the 86th Texas Legislature, directed the Higher Education Coordinating Board to conduct a study and make recommendations to the legislature regarding the feasibility of implementing statewide meta majors for institutions of higher education. Meta majors are commonly used within higher education institutions to group majors and courses into larger themes, and are especially helpful to guide undecided students to know what courses they should take. In conducting the study, the coordinating board was directed to establish an advisory committee, consider specific meta majors by academic disciplines, and report findings to the legislature by November 1st. The advisory committee included faculty and administrators from each Texas higher education region, with an equal number of members from public community colleges and universities, and with a majority of university representatives from institutions that had at least 25% of students enrolled in fall 2018 classified as transfer students. Additionally, members were appointed with consideration of their institution's mission, system affiliation, and institutional groupings under the coordinating board's accountability system. In fall 2020, the advisory committee members completed a qualitative data survey that asked for details about how the core curriculum worked for their respective institutions. The advisory committee met on October 8th and heard survey findings and provided input. The survey responses served as the basis for the report. Coordinating board staff analysis of the response data is presented in the report. The recommendation is for approval.
Thank you, Dr. Silverman. Any questions for Dr. Silverman from the board committee? If not, do I have a motion for approval of the report, please? Can I have a motion?
So moved. Donna.
Ms. Williams, thank you for that motion. Do I have a second, please?
And Ms. Schwartz, will second.
Thank you, Ms. Schwartz. Any discussion? Members, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. Thank you. We move on to agenda item 5K, which is consideration of adopting the Texas General Academic Institutions Increasing Successful Community College Transfer Report, General Appropriations Act, House Bill 1, Article 3, Section 49, 86th Texas Legislature Regular Session. Dr. Silverman, Assistant Commissioner for Academic Quality and Workforce, will present this item and be available to answer questions. Dr. Silverman.
Thank you, Dr. Farias. The coordinating board is, this report actually is a directive to the general academic institutions. So public universities are annually to submit a report to the coordinating board that details institutional efforts to increase the number and success and persistence of community college transfer students. The legislative directive requires the coordinating board to collect and analyze the institutional reports and institutional performance data. The report summarizes the action taken by the public universities to increase the number, success, and persistence of community college transfer students. The report also includes the staff analysis of the institutional responses and institutional data from existing coordinating board management reports. This is the 10th such report and is due to the legislature by November 1st. The recommendation is for approval.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Silverman. Do I have a motion for approval?
So move. Welcome, Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Motion by Mr. Wilson. Do I have a second?
Second, Donna Williams.
Thank you, Ms. Williams. Second by Ms. Williams. Any discussion? Hearing none, members, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposition? Hearing none, the motion passes. Thank you. We'll move on to decide about 5L, which is lunch, but if the committee would like to break for lunch now, or we can continue on. Do I have a consensus from the committee?
I'm okay to continue.
Okay, it's okay with everybody else to continue. We shall continue to cover the rest of the agenda. Thank you, Ms. Schwartz. Agenda item 5M is consideration of adopting Texas application for state financial aid advisory committee report set out in the Texas Education Code section 61.07762. Jarrell Booker, JD, Assistant Commissioner for College Readiness and Success, will present this item and be available to answer questions. Mr. Booker.
Thank you, Chairman Frias. Agenda 5M is dealing with the Texas application for state financial aid, where students who are eligible for Texas financial aid have traditionally filled out a paper application, such as from institution to institution. In the last legislative session, the coordinating board was required to appoint an advisory committee of stakeholders and financial aid personnel who are very familiar with the TASFA to help kind of assist in developing procedures and recommendations for putting that paper application online, possibly through or connected to our Advise Texas system. So the group met 4 times since July. I want to thank Claudette Jinks and Lisa Paez and my staff for managing this process, as well as Advise Texas, but they managed this process and staffed this committee to be able to come up with some recommendations. What you see before you is just a subset of the recommendations, but probably the key recommendations that the group kind of talked about that dealt with requiring people to accept, or higher education institutions to accept that TASFA online to help verify student eligibility for financial aid. A lot of times it's a paper process. This will allow it to be kind of automatic. Once it's established online, then you really want that system to connect to the student information systems. You want it to be able to calculate EFC, which you see there in that second bullet. You want it to be automatic. No need to put it online if you still have to do it manually. And then the last is the cost. We were asked to develop this and have this online application be ready for, I think, the class of entering class of 2022-23. So we're asking actually for support to actually develop and implement this online. And hopefully we can go back and ask for that or find outside funding to be able to support this implementation. Therefore, we asked for a favorable approval of the recommendation. It was a great group, very passionate, clearly understand TASFA and the usage. A lot of them come from institutions that use this, the TASFA form regularly, and putting it online, I think, will help the state and help a lot more students here in the state of Texas. So,
great, thank you, Mr. Booker. Any questions for Mr. Booker?
Yeah.
Fred,
Yes.
Okay, so Darrell, I'm surprised that it hadn't been online like a long time ago. So was it just funding, or what was the reason for filling out paper forms for so long?
Not everyone used it, so it didn't make sense. If everyone's not using it or not accepting it, then why put it on the Applied Texas system and require each institution to pay for something that not everyone is using? But the numbers have grown, and there's additional state aid that's grown. You know, Texas grants, TOG, TEG, and so forth. So I just think now it's come to a point that they want to keep better track of these students, and being online would make it simpler and easier.
Okay. Any other questions or comments from the board or the committee for Mr. Booker? If not, do I have a motion for approval of the report?
So moved, Donna Williams.
Thank you. Motion by Ms. Williams. Do I have a second?
Second, Welcome Wilson.
Thank you. Mr. Wilson seconds. Any discussion? Members, no discussion. Members, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposition? Hearing none, the motion passes. Thank you. We move on to agenda item 5N is consideration of adopting the study regarding streamlining physician licensing requirements for advanced practice registered nurses. This is Texas Education Code section 61.06693. Dr. Stacy Silverman, Assistant Commissioner for Academic Quality and Workforce, will present this item and be available to answer questions. Dr. Silverman.
Thank you, Dr. Farias. This report is coming to the board as a draft to allow the required collaborators some additional time to provide some input to the draft report. Senate Bill 2011, passed last session, requires the coordinating board to collaborate with at least one institution of higher education, the Texas Medical Board, and the Texas Board of Nursing to conduct a study regarding the feasibility of a pilot program to streamline the requirements for advanced practice registered nurses, or APRNs, to become eligible for a license to practice medicine. Texas Occupations Code defines an APRN as a nurse practitioner, nurse midwife, nurse anesthetist, or clinical nurse specialist. In March 2020, coordinating board staff prepared to convene a stakeholder work group of representatives from Texas institutions that offer both a Doctor of Medicine or Doctor of Osteopathic Medicine and a graduate professional nursing program with tracks leading to APRN certification and licensure. Unfortunately, the COVID-19 pandemic interrupted the original plan, as the institutions that would have participated were confronted with caring for COVID-19 patients while also transitioning their students to online learning. In order to complete the study, coordinating board staff consulted with the Board of Nursing, the Texas Medical Board, and representatives from the University of Texas Health Science Center Houston. The report describes the education and licensure requirements for APRNs and those required of medical students and medical residents. The study also includes input from the Texas nurse practitioners and incorporates data from the Texas Center for Nursing Workforce Studies and the Texas Medical and Dental Schools Application Services. The report is due to the legislature on December the 1st, and the recommendation is to authorize the commissioner to finalize the report and send the report to the legislature upon completion.
Thank you, Dr. Silverman. Do I have a motion to accept this?
So moved, Emma Schwartz.
Thank you, Ms. Schwartz. Do I have a second?
Second, Donna Williams.
Thank you, Ms. Williams. Second by Ms. Williams. Any discussion? Members, all in favor of hearing no discussion, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposition? Hearing none, the motion passes. Thank you very much, Dr. Silverman and committee members. We move on to agenda items 501 and 502, and these agenda items were approved on the consent calendar. Okay, we will move on to agenda items 503. And before we do that, we had some guests. I mentioned the University of Texas at Arlington in case they're online watching via the internet, or if they're on Zoom, or maybe they're in person. I mentioned Minerva Cordero was a Senior Associate Dean of Science and Professor of Mathematics. Amir Fabrin, Interim Director for Data Science Program Professors of Physics. Those were at UT Arlington. I mentioned them. And I wanted to mention the University of Texas at Austin. These are two programs that we've already approved earlier in the meeting, and that would be Eric Meyer, PhD, the Dean of the School of Information at UT Austin, and Kenneth Robert Fleshman, PhD, Professor of School of Information at UT Austin. This was the program of the Bachelor of Science and Bachelor of Arts in Informatics that we approved earlier. For the next item, we have guests from the University of Texas, Rio Grande Valley, Dr. Guy Bailey. Thank you for being here online, President of UT-RGV. Dr. John Krause, who's Executive Vice President for Health Affairs, the Dean of the School of Medicine, UT-RGV. Dr. Michael Laker, Dean of the College of Health Professions, UT-RGV. And Dr. Shirley Wells, who's the Chair of the Department of Occupational Therapy. And now we move on to, thank you all for being here, online or on the internet on Zoom. Agenda item 503 is consideration of approval of the request from the University of Texas, Rio Grande Valley for the Doctor of Occupational Therapy, OTD degree with a major in occupational therapy. Dr. Stacy Silverman, Assistant Commissioner for Academic Quality and Workforce, will present this item and be available to answer questions. Dr. Silverman.
Thank you, Dr. Farias. On the agenda today are two proposals from the University of Texas, Rio Grande Valley for health-related doctoral programs. The first is for a Doctor of Occupational Therapy degree program. UT-RGV currently offers a master's degree program in occupational therapy, which would be phased out as the proposed entry-level doctoral degree is initiated. The proposed OTD program would prepare students for professional practice and scholarly work in occupational therapy and enroll up to 32 students annually. The proposed face-to-face program would require 99 semester credit hours beginning for those post-baccalaureate degree for those beginning in summer 2021. Students would engage in required coursework, 2 levels of field work, and a doctoral capstone experience. In accordance with the institution's proposed hiring schedule, UT-RGV will hire 1 core faculty member per year for the first 5 years of the program. By June 1st of each of these years, the institution will provide documentation of the hires, and the institution will seek national accreditation from the Accreditation Council for Occupational Therapy Education. The recommendation is for approval, and as Dr. Farias mentioned, there are representatives available to take any questions.
Yes, I'd like to see if Dr. Bailey and Dr. Krause or any of their team would like to address the group, the committee.
Thank you very much. We appreciate your consideration of this proposal. Over the next few years, the doctorate is going to become the primary credential for occupational therapists. In the past, it's been the master's degree. And so our change, our movement from a master's to a doctorate reflects this change in the preferred credential. We've had a very successful master's program, and we think this program will be excellent as well. And we'd appreciate your support. Dean Krause may want to add a few words as well.
Just a few, Dr. Bailey, thank you. This is an important degree for us because there's such a need for training health professionals in the Rio Grande Valley. We need to have people that we can train locally so they can remain locally to care for the population. And this will build on a highly successful program. So we look forward to really having the committee review this at this time.
Thank you all so much for that. Members, do you have any questions for Dr. Silverman or Dr. Bailey or Dr. Krause?
No, just it looks like there's no other universities anywhere in that area that provide the same degree program. So with that, I'd like to make a motion that we approve it.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Wilson. Do I have a second?
Ms. Schwartz. Go ahead. Go ahead, Don.
By Ms. Schwartz.
No.
Okay. Any discussion? Okay, members, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 I vote aye as well. Any nays? Hearing none, the motion passes. Thank you and congratulations, Dr. Bailey, Dr. Krause, and the team there.
Thank you very much.
Okay, the next agenda item is 504, which is agenda item 504 is consideration of approving the request from the University of Texas, Rio Grande Valley for a Doctor of Pediatric Medicine degree. Before Dr. Stacy Silverman presents, we also have from UT-RGV, we have, of course, Dr. Guy Bailey, the president, We have Dr. John Krause, Executive Vice President of Health Affairs, and we have Dr. Lawrence Harkless, the Interim Dean for the School of Pediatric Medicine for UTRGV. Dr. Silverman will present, who's Assistant Commissioner of Academic Quality and Workforce, will present this item, be able to answer questions. Dr. Silverman.
Thank you, Dr. Farias. The University of Texas Rio Grande Valley is proposing a Doctor of Pediatric Medicine, or DPM, to begin in fall 2022. The DPM would prepare students for licensure and entry into the practice of podiatry. Doctors of pediatric medicine are physicians specifically trained to examine, diagnose, and treat any disease, disorder, physical injury, deformity, or ailment of the human foot. The DPM would be a 4-year full-time face-to-face program aligned with UTRGV's allopathic or MD granting degree program. Pediatric medicine students would spend the first 2 years of the DPM program fully integrated with medical students. If approved, the UTRGV DPM would be the 10th program in the US and the first program in Texas. The Bureau of Labor Statistics anticipates an increased need for podiatrists through 2028, estimating 700 job openings per year. In 2018, podiatry schools across the US produced 543 graduates, indicating a need for additional podiatrists. In accordance with the institution's proposed hiring schedule, UTRGV will hire 3 core faculty members prior to enrolling students for fall 2022. By June 1st, 2022, the institution will provide documentation of the hires, and the institution will seek accreditation for the DPM program from the national accreditor, the Council on Pediatric Medical Education. The recommendation is for approval.
Okay, Dr. Bailey or Dr. Krause or Dr. Harkless, would any of you like to add some comments?
Thank you. Just a couple of things. The state of Texas in the legislative session of 1973 actually authorized a school of pediatric medicine that was never founded. This is particularly important for the Rio Grande Valley. And as most of you already know, we have a very high incidence of diabetes. And so one of the consequences of diabetes are foot and leg problems. Those problems can be addressed by podiatrists much more efficiently and in a much more cost-effective way than they can by orthopedic surgeon. And so we think not only is this degree needed in the state, but it's particularly crucial for the region we live in. Dean Harkless may want to, let me introduce him. If he may want to say a word or two, or Vice President Krause, either one here.
Dr. Krause, you can talk and then maybe I'll summarize if you have a comment.
Sure. Thanks, Dr. Harkless. I'll let you comment. This is an extremely important program for medical care, not only in the Valley, but in the state as a whole. We're thrilled actually to be able to bring forward this program for the first school of pediatric medicine in the state of Texas. It's long overdue, as Dr. Bailey said. The medical school is extremely enthusiastic about working in an integrated manner with the School of Pediatric Medicine. And Dr. Harkless, I'm going to go ahead and call on you for some brief comments as well.
Yeah, well, I'm honored to be here. I'm a UT employee. I was at the Health Science Center in San Antonio for 30 years, and I ran the podiatry residency training program, which was really the only one in the country in a major academic health center that started in 1972. And so we had a paltry sum of money from the legislature for the residency training program, which ended in 17. And I was in California. I started a school there, and actually I retired. And Dr. Bailey, Dr. Krause talked me out of being a retirement to come down and start the school. And Dr. Bailey mentioned that the law in 1973, but my mentor was a podiatrist in San Antonio named Dr. Louis Bogie, but he had the vision for a school and helped pass that law in 73 for that. And I actually had a file on that. It's quite interesting. So Dr. Krause, know I'm very spiritual, but I call it the promised inheritance. It just took 46 years for it to happen, like the children of Israel inheriting Canaan. But it's really great. The prevalence here is about 26% for diabetes. I was the first program from the medical school in San Antonio to come to the Valley through the Area Health Education Center in 1996. So I received a primary care grant from HHS. So I already had a presence in the Valley. They didn't really know that. at Valley Baptist Hospital and the Sioux Clinica, which is one of the largest fairly qualified health centers. So I think everything is in place to integrate. I call it population health, workforce, and professional education. This will integrate that. I couldn't be more excited about what's happening here in the Valley for the growth. And stay tuned, we'll be the best podiatry school in the nation because we'll be part of the University of Texas system and the state decided we are important. So thank you all for approving it and stay tuned.
Thank you, Dr. Bailey and Dr. Kraus and Dr. Harkless. I will say this, I appreciate you working very closely with all our coordinating board staff and working and providing information. As all the board members know, I live in Valley, grew up here and all my life. And so this is so important, not only for the Valley, but for the whole state of Texas. It'll be, as Dr. Silverman said, the first podiatry school of medicine in the state of Texas. So this is so important, not only to our region, as Dr. Bailey said, but it's so important for population health, as Dr. Harkless mentioned. And this is a key public health initiative that's really going to help not only the Valley, but the entire state. So thank you all for bringing, innovative programs, Dr. Bailey and Dr. Kraus, over to really improve healthcare for everyone and looking at public health challenges that we have now, because we need to all do that in order to not only help our community, but our state and our nation. So I appreciate y'all bringing that. Before Mr. Wilson makes the motion, I would like to make the motion to approval by this committee to present to the board tomorrow on this particular item.
Dr. Farias, I'd like to make a second, but also just a quick comment, just to mention that my first internship, my first job really in a hospital was at the California College of Podiatric Medicine back in the mid-90s that had an associated podiatric hospital. And so I do have a great appreciation for podiatric medicine, having gotten to observe podiatric procedures during that time and really understand the importance of that program. So it's exciting to see that come to Texas.
Yes.
And I'll second the motion.
Thank you for those comments and for the motion, Ms. Schwartz. Yes, we're all looking forward to the success of that. And we're talking about UTRGV Health, that just the medical school graduated its first class this past May, and things are looking great as far as, so I was glad, and I'm sure Dr. Kraus, Dr. Bailey, and we're all concerned with the new schools in terms of the residency programs, and also there's a lot of issues that we all need to keep up on. So I appreciate the board's persistence and importance of studying all these issues of healthcare for the entire state. So I have a motion made by myself, for the record, Fred Farias, and a second by Ms. Schwartz. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we will ask for all those in favor of the proposal, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposition? Hearing none, the motion passes. So thank you all very much. Thank you, Dr. Bailey, Dr. Kraus.
Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Dr. Farias and board.
Y'all take care, and we'll move this forward to the board for tomorrow's meeting. Okay, great. We are ready to move on to agenda item. Let's see, we're moving right along here. Agenda item 5P, which was approved on the consent calendar. We'll move on next to agenda item 5Q, which is consideration of approving the issuance of requests for applications to solicit employers to offer internships to the Texas Works Internship Program. Dr. Jarrell Booker, JD, Assistant Commissioner for College Readiness and Success, will present this item and be available to answer questions. Mr. Booker.
Thank you, Chairman Farias. It looks like I have the last two items before lunch, so you never want to stand in the way of that. As a reminder to each of you, the 86th Legislature authorized a statewide internship program for undergraduate students to kind of strengthen their workforce skills and support their transition into the workforce. With that authorization, we are required to put together a program that allows them to intern, but also for employers to solicit for employers to ask for interns, and in turn we pay half of the intern salary along with the employer. This RFA is merely a request for two things. The RFA will allow us to solicit employers who actually show administrative and financial capacity to be a part of this program. And then would also allow us to have a mechanism to actually pay our portion of the 50% of the salary to the employer. So we have determined that the RFA is the best way to solicit and to be able to pay. Therefore, we're asking for approval. Just to give you a heads up, we'll start this In the spring, the portal's being designed. I'd like to acknowledge Vanessa Malo and Andrew Harper and our staff who've been great on designing this program, and also Chapels and financial aid and helping us design it and get it going well. So I hope we can get approval on this RFA so we can start to solicit the employers to offer internships.
Thank you, Mr. Booker. Is there a motion to approve the RFA for the Texas Works Internship Program?
So moved. It's Donna Williams.
Thank you, Ms. Williams. Motion by Ms. Williams. Do I have a second?
Emma Schwartz will second.
Okay, second by Ms. Schwartz. Thank you. Any discussion?
I have a question. This is Donna. Jarrell,
Yes.
how do we get employers to know about the program? How do we attract employers?
Absolutely. Well, first we partner with TWC to use their list and their networks to reach out their work investment boards all over the state. That's first. We're actually also using their online site to post the positions and to post that we have this new program started. But two people I spoke about on my staff, their job is to travel the state, speak to chambers, and try to get as many people to apply through the RFA, and then go back and sort through and see who can actually submit. So a lot of communications, a lot of marketing. If the board approves this, then you'll start to see it a lot more how we're going out and putting out the word that this is available.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions or discussion? If not, members, when I call your name, please state whether you're voting for or against. Mr. Campbell.
He's gone.
Okay. Ms. Schwartz.
For.
Mr. Campbell back?
This is Mr. Campbell. I'm for.
Thank you, Mr. Campbell. Ms. Schwartz?
For.
Mr. Torn? I think he had to step out. Ms. Williams?
For.
Mr. Wilson?
For.
Thank you. Motion passes. We move on to agenda item 5R, which is consideration of approving a request to establish a contract with a higher education artificial intelligence vendor for the virtual advising project ADV. I like ADV. Y'all remember that, right? Jarrell Booker will remind us about it. Assistant Commissioner for College Readiness and Success will present this item and be available to answer questions. Mr. Booker. Mr. Booker? Hello?
Hey, it looks like my Wi-Fi cut off. Can y'all hear me?
We can now hear you. Yes, we are just introducing you with the ADV agenda item 5R.
Thank you. I used my backup plan. I knew this could happen and had to wait to the last one, so I'm on my phone. So thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to talk about ADV. A lot of you are familiar with our virtual advising project, where we pair artificial intelligence with near-peer advisors. This is a project we're very excited about, as it will help support and provide guidance for not only students going to college, but also possibly for the workforce. The chatbot has over 1,200 answers and questions that we may get through text. But what we have found is this is a growing project initiative where, in light of COVID and the things we've been seeing recently, virtual advising is something that is going to be critical moving forward as the way we do business. And luckily, we were already a leader in the nation on doing this. And now we have found that we can actually reach up to 300,000 students. The commissioner has been wonderful in understanding how this can help better serve students, and particularly students in rural and urban populations that need better advising. And what we're seeking is, from last year, we requested 400,000, but now we have the ability to possibly get additional funds to expand this project, and we're seeking it to go up to $1 million to be able to expend those additional funds. The project has unlimited options and ways to actually grow to not only, K-12 students, workforce, as well as people who might be returning to college with some college and no degree. So therefore, I ask for favorable approval on the agenda item.
Thank you, Mr. Booker. Members, any questions for Mr. Booker on this item? Do I have a motion then for approval of the contract?
So moved, Emma Schwartz.
Thank you, Ms. Schwartz. We have a motion by Ms. Schwartz. A second, please.
Second, welcome, Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson, or second by Mr. Wilson. Members, when I call your name, please state whether you're voting for or against. Mr. Campbell? We'll move on. He'll probably get on the line here in a minute. Ms. Schwartz?
For.
Okay. Mr. Campbell, are you back? Okay. Mr. Torn? Ms. Williams?
For.
Mr. Wilson? Mr. Wilson?
For.
Mr. Campbell back on?
Yeah, this is, sorry, they keep muting me. I'm for. This is Cody Camp.
Okay, that's fine. We're wrapping it up, but thank you. Motion passes. Thank you very much. We move on to agenda items 5S 1 through 3, which were on the consent calendar. And then agenda items 5S 4 was heard earlier in the meeting. Agenda item 6 is adjournment. If there's no further discussion, may I have a motion, or is there any discussion before I move on? Hearing no discussion, do I have a motion for adjournment?
So moved. Donna Williams.
Thank you, Ms. Williams. Do I have a second for adjournment?
Ms. Schwartz, seconds.
Thank you, Ms. Schwartz. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Hearing none, the motion passes and the Committee on Academic and Workforce Success is now completed for today. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Farias. All right, so now the time is 12:22. We will break for lunch and we will reconvene sharply at 12:52. Thank you.